In the heart of a Michigan winter, a woman walked into a store, waved at a security camera, and then vanished into thin air. It was November 2009, and the small lakeside town of Cedar Bend was locked in its first deep freeze. Eliza Serrin, a 31-year-old architect from Chicago, had booked a secluded A-frame cabin on the edge of Whisper Lake for a week of solitude and design work. She told her brother it would be 5 days of drafting, silence, and disconnecting from the world. The property was owned by a former engineer named Arthur Pike, who rented it out using simple paper flyers posted in the local diner. No online bookings, no credit cards, just cash and a handshake agreement that acknowledged the spotty cell service and the nearest town being a 20-minute drive on a good day. The cabin was her retreat, but it would become her prison. Eliza arrived on a Tuesday. The last time anyone can confirm seeing her was at the Lakeside General, a combination grocery and hardware store 3 miles from the cabin. Surveillance video shows her buying fire starters, a gallon of water, some fruit, and a novel. She was wearing a dark green parka and a knitted hat. As she left, she gave a small wave to the store clerk, a man named Ben Carter, who later described her as calm and looking forward to the peace. That video, time-stamped 4:02 p.m. on November 17th, would be analyzed frame by frame for years to come. Arthur Pike expected Eliza to drop the key at his mailbox by Sunday. When she didn't, he assumed the icy roads were to blame. He waited a day, then drove his SUV as far as he could before trekking the rest of the way on foot. What he found when he arrived defied all logic. The cabin door was locked from the inside. He used his master key and stepped into a chilling scene. The space was frigid but perfectly orderly. A partially completed architectural sketch sat on the desk. Her suitcase was open on the bed, clothes neatly stacked inside. A cold cup of coffee was on the counter. Her winter boots were side by side near the entrance. Her coat was hanging on a hook, but Eliza was gone. She was there, and then she simply wasn't. Pike rushed outside. A fresh snowfall had covered the entire landscape, leaving no tracks, no tire marks, nothing but an unbroken sheet of white. He drove directly to the county sheriff's office. A massive search was launched immediately. Deputies, state police, a K-9 unit, and local volunteers combed the woods for miles. Helicopters scanned the frozen lake shores. Divers checked the deeper parts of the lake, despite the forming ice. For over a week, they found absolutely nothing. Not a single mitten, not a scrap of fabric, no indication she had ever walked away from that cabin. It was as if the forest had swallowed her whole. Eliza's brother, Mark, flew in from Cleveland. He held a press conference, standing beside a large photo of his sister smiling in her studio. His voice broke as he described her as brilliant, careful, the kind of person who planned everything. A $20,000 reward was offered by their parents. Tips trickled in. A trucker reported seeing a woman matching her description near the highway, but the timing was off. A psychic from Detroit provided coordinates that led to an empty hunting shack. By mid-December, the official search was called off. Eliza Serrin's name was entered into the state's missing persons database, a mystery frozen in time. For nearly a decade, the case remained dormant. Then, in March 2019, 2 cousins riding ATVs through a remote section of state land spotted something caught in the thawing ice of a creek. It was a leather satchel, frozen stiff and weathered. Inside, they found the ruined pages of a sketchbook, a metal tin of drafting pencils, and a university ID card with a name clearly printed: Eliza Serrin. The cousins, Kyle and Jason Miller, knew the name instantly. Their aunt had volunteered on the original search. They marked the location with GPS and went straight to the Forest Service station. Within hours, the county sheriff reopened the case. The bag was the first crack in a decade of silence. Detective Eva Rostova, who had been a new deputy in 2009, was assigned as lead. She remembered the case vividly, haunted by its impossibility. She requested a full forensic workup on the satchel. Some sketchbook pages were destroyed by water, but a few in the middle were salvageable. One showed a detailed drawing of a pine cone. Another, dated November 19th, had a handwritten note in the margin: "Heard knocking after dark, didn't open the door." A third page, torn at the corner, had just 6 words scrawled in a rushed hand: "He knows I'm out here alone." The discovery didn't just reopen an investigation, it tore open a wound the community had tried to forget. For Detective Rostova, it was a starting point. She sat in the evidence room, the satchel under bright lights, surrounded by the original case files. The initial search had been massive but hampered by brutal weather. A storm had rolled in, dumping more snow and dropping temperatures to dangerous lows. The search coordinator, a veteran named Frank Briggs, had written in his final report that the lack of any trace was statistically bizarre. He concluded that Eliza likely never left the cabin on her own 2 feet. Someone or something had taken her. Rostova found Mark Serrin's original statement. He described his sister as meticulous and safety-conscious. She had called him the morning after she arrived using the cabin's landline. She said the place was ideal, but mentioned something strange. She'd found fresh cigarette ends near the wood pile and boot prints under a back window that didn't belong to the owner. She wasn't frightened, just curious. Mark told her to let Pike know, but it seems she never did. Rostova made a note to find Arthur Pike for another conversation. The forensic report on the satchel came back. The paper matched Eliza's sketchbooks. The handwriting was confirmed as hers, but the bag itself held new clues. Soil in the strap matched clay-based soil found near creek banks, not the sandy dirt around the cabin. There were also tiny synthetic fibers, black in color. And on the inside lining, almost invisible, were 2 small blood stains. DNA testing was ordered. While they waited, Rostova assembled a new search team. This time, they would start from where the bag was found, a location 4 miles north of the cabin that was outside the original search grid. It was rough, dense terrain you wouldn't enter by chance. You had to be led there, or you had to know exactly where you were going. They brought in ground-penetrating radar and a cadaver dog. A forensic anthropologist from the University of Michigan, Dr. Ian Price, joined the effort. On March 15th, the dog, a Labrador named Baron, alerted near an eroded section of the creek bank. Dr. Price's team began a slow, careful dig. They found a swatch of green fabric matching Eliza's parka, then a button. A few days later, they uncovered bone fragments buried over a foot down. Dental records confirmed the inevitable. The remains were Eliza's. But the most critical find was still to come. Buried several feet from the bones, wrapped in decayed plastic, was a folding hunting knife. The blade was rusted, but the brand, Northwoods, was clear. Forensic analysis found microscopic traces of blood in the hinge. The blood matched Eliza's DNA. This was no longer a missing persons case. It was a homicide. Detective Rostova now had a murder weapon. The Northwoods brand was common, sold at countless outdoor stores, but it was a thread to pull. She re-interviewed everyone from the original case. Arthur Pike, the cabin owner, was now in his 70s. He repeated his alibi. He'd been at a conference in Grand Rapids when Eliza vanished, confirmed by receipts and witnesses. When asked about the cigarette butts and boot prints, he said he was a non-smoker and had no idea who might have been lurking. He was cooperative but offered no new leads. The trail seemed cold until a name from the past resurfaced. Rostova went back to the Lakeside General Store. Ben Carter, the clerk, still worked there. He remembered Eliza clearly. When Rostova asked if anyone else was in the store that day, Carter thought hard. He recalled a few regulars and a local handyman named Leo Dunn who had been stacking bags of salt near the entrance. Leo Dunn. Rostova wrote the name down. Carter said Dunn did odd jobs, plowing, landscaping, small repairs. He was quiet, kept to himself, and smoked hand-rolled cigarettes. Rostova ran his name. Leo Dunn, 45, born in the county. A minor record, a DUI from 2005, a trespassing ticket in 2010. His last known address was a rental property less than 2 miles from Eliza's cabin. His residence had been just outside the original search perimeter. Rostova felt a jolt. She learned Dunn had lived there until 2013, when he was evicted for unpaid rent. The landlord mentioned an old, beat-up pickup truck and a snowmobile. Rostova dug deeper and found a bankruptcy filing from 2014 that listed various tools and, significantly, several knives. The filing also had a forwarding address for a boarding house in Muskegon. The manager there said Dunn had rented a room but left after a dispute. She thought he was working at a warehouse. The warehouse manager confirmed Dunn had worked there briefly but was let go for unreliability. A coworker mentioned he was probably crashing in a camper somewhere in the state forest. He was a ghost, living off the grid. Rostova convened a meeting with the sheriff and Dr. Price. The profile was compelling. Dunn was at the store, lived nearby, smoked, knew the woods, and had a history of instability. Dr. Price noted the recovery site required local knowledge. It was a deliberate hiding place. The sheriff approved a warrant to find and question Leo Dunn. But first, they had to locate him. A Department of Natural Resources officer reported an unauthorized camper in a remote clearing. Rostova and a team moved in at dawn. The camper was an old, rusted trailer surrounded by junk. Smoke rose from a campfire. They knocked. The door opened and Leo Dunn stood there, unshaven and wearing a black work jacket. His eyes were weary. Rostova said they needed to talk about November 2009. Dunn stared, then nodded slowly. He said, "I wondered when you'd finally come." In the interview room, Dunn was quiet but waved a lawyer. He admitted he'd been in the store that day but claimed he didn't really notice Eliza. He admitted to walking in the woods at night near the cabin, saying it helped him sleep. He admitted he might have been near the property but denied ever going inside. Rostova showed him the evidence: his presence, his proximity, his knowledge of the area, the knife brand. Dunn's story didn't change, but it also didn't add up. He insisted, "I didn't hurt that woman." The truth was buried, but the land never forgets. Then he offered a new detail. The second night he was near the cabin, he heard someone else in the trees. He saw a flicker of a flashlight beam before it went out. He assumed it was another person and left. He never came forward because he was scared. Rostova's focus shifted. If Dunn was telling the truth, a second person was there that night. She cross-referenced all volunteers and locals with access to the area. One name stood out: a DNR ranger named David Moss. Moss had participated heavily in the 2009 search and knew the terrain better than anyone. Records showed he had taken unexpected personal days starting November 20th, 2009. Rostova drove to his home. David Moss, now retired, answered the door. He was in his 60s with a firm handshake. He remembered the case well. When Rostova asked about the personal leave, he said a cousin had been in a car accident out of state. He had patrolled near the cabin routinely. Then Rostova asked if he owned a Northwoods knife. Moss went to a drawer and pulled one out, the same model. He said all the rangers had them. But then he mentioned something odd. He'd lent his knife to a volunteer during the search and never got it back. He couldn't recall the volunteer's name. Rostova spent the next day sifting through old volunteer sign-in sheets. She found a name: Owen Gable. The handwriting was messy. She ran the name. Owen Gable had lived in Cedar Bend from 2008 to 2012. He'd worked a series of short-term jobs. More importantly, in 2011, a woman named Sarah Ellis had taken out a restraining order against him, citing obsessive behavior. Sarah, now living in Petoskey, agreed to talk. She described Gable as quiet but unnerving, showing up at her work, leaving notes, talking about permanent connections. She said he made her feel like she was being consumed. The profile of a predator was coming into focus. Rostova's search for Gable hit dead ends until a postal clerk remembered him using a general delivery address. The clerk said he hadn't been in for months. There was overdue mail for a campground permit. Rostova drove to the campsite. It was empty, but she found a makeshift fire pit and hidden under a pile of rocks, a mason jar. Inside was a button from a green parka, a lock of brown hair, and a torn piece of paper with a sketch of a pine cone, signed Eliza Serrin. This was no campsite, it was a trophy room. A forensic team swarmed the area. They found more jars containing small personal effects and hidden under a log a journal wrapped in plastic. It was Owen Gable's. The entries were a window into a disturbed mind. One from November 2009 read, "She is perfect in her solitude. She doesn't know I'm here, and that is the gift." Another entry mentioned, "The ranger's knife is mine now. It has a purpose." The final pages held the confession. "They found the bag. The river gives up its secrets. I can hear her in the water." Forensic tests confirmed the hair in the jar was Eliza's. A fingerprint on the button matched Owen Gable's, on file from the restraining order. An arrest warrant was issued. A DNR officer spotted smoke from a ravine 2 weeks later. A team moved in and found Gable living in a makeshift shelter. He offered no resistance. In custody, he confessed in a flat, emotionless voice. He described watching Eliza, seeing her through the window. He said he knocked on her door the night she packed to leave, just wanting to talk. When she saw him, her face filled with terror. He forced the door open. She grabbed a small knife from the counter, and in the struggle, he was cut. He hit her and she fell, striking her head. He carried her unconscious into the freezing night, walking to the creek bank. He had the ranger's knife but hesitated to use it. As he knelt there indecisive, she stopped breathing, succumbing to the cold and her injuries. He buried her in a shallow grave and kept her belongings as tokens. He participated in the search to stay close to the investigation, a cruel penance. The knife he buried near her body, a silent witness for a decade. The mystery was finally solved. Owen Gable pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. At the sentencing, Mark Serrin told him, "You took my sister's life, but you will never own her story." Detective Rostova closed the file, but the echoes of the case remained. For the family, there was no true closure, only the hard, cold truth in place of a haunting silence. On the 10-year anniversary of her disappearance, a memorial was held in Cedar Bend. The community gathered, lighting candles that flickered against the night, a testament to a life that was not forgotten. If you were captivated by this journey for justice, please show your support by giving this video a like and sharing it to help keep other cold cases in the light. For more deep dives into unresolved mysteries, make sure you're subscribed to Winds of Thought. What unsolved case do you believe needs a fresh look? Let us know in the comments. Every case deserves an answer.